Solutions Spotlight. An energy divide is forming. Which side are you on? The energy landscape has repriced. Most organizations' planning frameworks haven't. That mismatch between what the market is doing and how companies budget, plan, and allocate capital around energy is opening a divide. On one side are organizations that have recalibrated. On the other are those running multi-year plans against assumptions that no longer hold. The distance between them is growing, and it's starting to surface in margins and operational resilience. Three assumptions are quietly breaking down. 85% of industrial leaders now rank reducing energy consumption at the asset and plant level as a high or medium priority, according to Verdantix's Global Corporate Survey 2026. But awareness doesn't always equal action. The planning frameworks most organizations rely on were calibrated for a different environment, and the gap between those frameworks and current conditions is widening faster than most teams realize. The first is the rate escalator. Long-range energy budgets at many organizations still carry annual escalators in the 2 to 3% range, a figure inherited from previous decades of relative price stability. But Redaptive's analysis of U.S. power market data from 2020 to 2024 shows that the median compound annual growth rate for industrial electricity prices is running at 5.2%. And the recent trajectory is steeper still. EIA data shows average industrial electricity costs per kilowatt hour jumped 11.4% year over year in January 2026, more than triple what most planning models assume annually. When that kind of gap compounds across a portfolio of facilities over a multi-year horizon, the cumulative budget exposure is significant. The second is the capital cost baseline. Infrastructure project estimates are often anchored to cost benchmarks that predate the current shift in labor and materials pricing. The Producer Price Index for electrical contractors, for example, has climbed more than 33% since 2020, nearly triple its prior growth rate. Organizations running multi-year infrastructure plans against pre-2020 baselines are discovering the mismatch at the worst possible moment, when a project hits procurement. The third is the reliability model. The grid's supply mix is shifting in ways that affect dependable capacity. While total generation capacity is growing, much of the new capacity is variable, that is, solar and wind, with significantly lower reliability value than the firm, dispatchable generation it's replacing. Unsurprisingly, NERC's latest assessment places multiple regions at elevated or high risk of energy shortfalls before 2030. For end users, the cost implications are direct. When the gap between supply and demand narrows, capacity markets reprice, and those higher costs flow through to utility bills. Organizations that haven't stress-tested their budgets against a less reliable grid are carrying cost exposure they may not have quantified. Any one of these gaps is manageable. The challenge is that all three are moving simultaneously, and many planning cycles aren't designed to absorb that kind of compound change. But some companies are already adapting. Here's where the leaders are pulling ahead. The organizations creating measurable separation share a few characteristics. First, they've moved energy out of a siloed monitoring function and into operational decision-making, connecting consumption data to production scheduling, maintenance planning, and real-time process control. For energy-intensive industries like chemicals, metals, and electronics, that integration is becoming a competitive factor in margin management. Second, they've closed the gap between energy and finance. Verdantix research shows over 80% of executives expect sustainability investments to deliver measurable financial returns. Leading organizations are acting on this by building shared KPIs across energy and finance functions and evaluating projects on commercial terms first. That alignment accelerates capital allocation and reduces the internal friction that has historically stalled energy investments. Third, they're using financing structures that match the problem. Energy as a service models allow organizations to deploy efficiency, storage, and infrastructure upgrades without upfront capital, with payments tied to verified performance. As institutional capital flows into long-term energy performance contracts, the financing barrier is dropping, particularly for distributed portfolios, where internal budget constraints have historically been the bottleneck. The gap compounds. One large multi-site operator is on track to realize more than $100 million in energy and maintenance savings over 10 years after upgrading energy infrastructure across nearly 400 facilities without deploying a dollar of capital. Organizations that have made similar shifts are seeing measurable gains in cost predictability, operational resilience, and the ability to pursue growth without being constrained by aging infrastructure or misaligned budgets. Organizations that haven't are absorbing compounding exposure in electricity costs, deferred project economics, and grid risk. The divide is accelerating, and the longer it goes unaddressed, the more expensive it becomes to close. To explore this topic in depth, what the data shows, where the divide is heading, and what practical steps organizations can take now, join us for a live webinar on June 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern. The webinar is titled, The Energy Gap: Why Cost and Reliability Are Becoming the New Competitive Divide, moderated by Jessica Hunt, co-owner of E+E Leader. Register at the link in this article to join the conversation.